So, like I said, at this point, and it should say chapter 4, section 1. These are just from an old text, from the older textbook that it was chapter 3. Um, Hopefully at this point there is some stuff that you already know because we've been doing some I guess official learning, right? Like we've been doing the reading guide, we've been doing some video, we've been doing some slide decks. There have been things that we've been doing prior to this. So hopefully as we go through our notes, ladies and gentlemen, a lot of this stuff, my hope is that a lot of this stuff you're going to be like, dude, why is she even telling me this? I already know this. If that's how you feel as we're doing these notes, then yay. That means you're learning and you're doing exactly what you should be doing. So, yay on you. All right, so let's take a quick look at what hopefully we are going to be figuring out today. First of all, we want to be able to trace the flow of energy through living systems. Again, as we talk about the tracing of energy, what we are talking about is an ecosystem. Because please remember, when we talked about the organization of our biosphere, the ecosystem was the level where we started including non living things, right? So, as we talk about energy flow, we're always talking about ecosystems. And because again, energy is a non-living factor, an abiotic factor in the ecosystem. And by the way, the ecosystem wouldn't work at all if it wasn't for this energy. Like we need energy to live. The second thing that we are going to be looking at is we are going to be identifying three types of ecological pyramids. So we've taken a look definitely at one, but there's a couple of other ones that we want to take a quick look through at. All right. Are there any questions or issues with today's objectives? All right, ladies and gentlemen. So we continue. Okay. Each link in a food chain is known as a trophic level. So we've talked about food chains, these very direct, who eats whom, how energy gets transferred systems. And each link, every time you take an arrow, that arrow is moving you to a new trophic level. So again, trophic levels are going to represent a feeding step in the transfer of energy and matter in an ecosystem. So please keep in mind, as one organism eats another, not only are they absorbing energy, but they're also absorbing matter. One of the examples that I always give is kind of like, okay, so let's say, for example, we have an athlete, and then that athlete is trying to build mass, right? So they've been like working out, lifting weights, trying to get bigger muscles. When they eat, most weightlifters are going to be trying to eat a lot of high protein food. Now, again, obviously, food we eat because we need the energy to keep our bodies going. But that weightlifter is specifically going to be picking proteins going way back to the beginning of the school year when we talked about those macromolecules. You want to eat proteins because those proteins are going to help build your muscle. So every time we go up a trophic level, we are transferring mass and we are transferring energy because that is the whole reason that we eat, right? We need those nutrients to help our body processes. We need the energy to keep our body going. By the way, I want to point out that going way back to the beginning of the school year, when we started talking about the 8 characteristics of all living things, we said that one of the characteristics of all living things was the fact that they needed mass and energy from their environment in order to survive. So now we're looking at that. Okay. So, like last section, we looked at a lot of genetics, which was that whole like universal genetic code. So now we're looking at this idea of transference of energy and matter, which again is one of the characteristics of every single living thing. Every single living thing requires energy. Every living thing brings matter into themselves from their outside environment. All right, issues or questions? Let's talk about biomass. So, in our trophic levels, biomass is the amount of organic matter that comprises a group of organisms in a habitat. So it is the amount of organic matter, it is the amount of stuff that is either living or was living at some point, that is available for use in any particular habitat slash ecosystem. Again, a habitat is the place where these organisms live, and the ecosystem is going to be the interaction of the different communities with their physical environment. As you move up a food chain or a food web, not only is the energy decreasing, but the biomass decreases as well. I want you to consider this. We've all seen The Lion King, right? You have these huge herds of gazelle and giraffe, but then you only have like the small little pride of lions, which is maybe like 20, 30 lions, I think, in the whole show. Maybe it's actually less than that. The more complicated the organism, the higher up the organism is, the fewer there's going to be. The amount decreases along with the energy that is being passed along. And of course, those are related. If less energy is available, you're not going to have that many individuals of that organism. But I want you to consider this, even like from like cows to like, grass. If you go out into like the Great Lakes, or not the Great Lakes, the Great Plains, right? Your Nebraska, southern Montana, Kansas, those areas. It is just like literally just miles and miles and miles of flat grassland. Every single one of those grasses represents an individual organism. There's literally hundreds of millions of blades of grass and maybe a few thousand heads of cattle. As you go up the trophic levels, the amount of energy that we discussed earlier, that decreases, but so does the actual amount of living things, the biomass. Again, as you move, energy is transferred upward, but again, is diminished with each transfer. And we've already talked about that. Every time we transfer up a level, we decrease the amount of energy that now becomes available to that particular trophic level. All right, issues or question. Cool. All right, so again, we sort of saw this already. Okay. So the base of our pyramid is going to be our producers. Another word for producer is autotroph. So we can use these words interchangeably. I can call like for example, a tree, some grass. And again, normally the producers are photosynthetic, right? So where they can do photosynthesis and use the energy from the sun to create their own food. There are some other processes that can be like that producers can do, but they're not really in the purview of this class. So at the base of the pyramid, the largest base of the pyramid, we have the producers. Primary consumers come next. These are called herbivores. Herbivores only eat plants. So primary consumers are the herbivores. Secondary consumers are usually going to be our small carnivores. So, like something small, perhaps, like, I'm trying to think, maybe grass snakes, perhaps, those are pretty big actually. Totally drawn a blank. Yay, biology teacher. And then the top carnivores, these are going to be the top predators in an area. So let's say if this was like a field, the producers might be grass, the primary consumers might be mice, the secondary consumers might be snakes, and the tertiary or the top carnivore might be a hawk. Okay, so that is something typical for a field environment. Alternatively, if this was like in the in an like in the ocean. My producers might be algae for that are doing photosynthesis. My primary consumers might be some kind of small fish, maybe like a herring that eat the algae. Secondary consumers might be something of a larger nature, maybe like a salmon that is going to eat the herring. And then my tertiary or my top carnivores, these guys might be, for example, shark, or perhaps uh what are they? Oh my god, completely drawing a blank here. Oh, like walruses. Okay, that might be your top carnivore in a marine environment. Okay. But again, we can see, and I don't even necessarily like these numbers using percentages, but I always like to use like numbers like maybe 10,000, and then it's 100,000 or 1,000, 100, and then 10. But you can see every time it goes up, there's less and less and less energy. So if there's 100% energy at the producer's level, then there's only 10% that gets transferred to the herbivores, 1% that gets transferred to the small carnivores or the secondary consumers, and only 1/10% that gets transferred to the tertiary consumers. Issues or questions. So we are now looking at the ecological pyramid. So again, ecological pyramids are going to show kind of the amount of energy and the amount of matter contained within each trophic level for a given food chain or food web inside a particular ecosystem. So obviously this first one over here, this is obviously a marine ecosystem where I see my algae, I see shrimp, I see small fish, and then I see some sort of a shark. Okay, so again, very large on the bottom, a lot of energy, a lot of biomass. Smaller for the primary consumer, smaller yet for the secondary consumer, tiny for the top or tertiary consumer. I want you to consider this in about 100 square miles of ocean, there might be one great white shark. There might be millions of shrimp. So again, as we go up, not only is it less energy, but also less biomass. This ecological pyramid is representing it looks like a field environment. I have grasses as my producers. Again, it looks like 1,000 kilocalories of energy. I have a primary consumer. These look like grasshoppers. And I see only 100 kilocalories of energy being there. I then have a secondary consumer. So these guys are going to be eating the grasshoppers. Those look like moles. And these moles contain 10 kilocalories of energy. And then at the very top, that looks like a barn owl who probably is eating the voles. And that is a tertiary consumer. And again, we see very little energy at the very top there. Issues or questions?
Yeah, let me finish the last few sentences. Words, my fault. Words.
You're good.
Yeah, I'm ready.
Awesome.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. All right, so this is going to be our last slide because we are running out of time. So I'm just going to kind of leave it up here and we can talk about it tomorrow. But you guys can go ahead and get it written down. In the meantime, I am